You probably already answered this, but why start from scratch versus using an engine? Why reinvent the wheel? It's a good question. And the answer is twofold. One is because I think it's important for game developers who are going to be serious programmers to learn everything about how a game works. And if you start with an engine, then it basically changes what you're learning from the fundamental truth of how to implement a game to someone else's version of that. They have basically gone from what the actual game code actually does and put a big old giant layer in between you and that. So now what you're really learning is that engine. You haven't learned how to make games. You've learned how to make games in Unity, right? And if Unity were to disappear, for example, you would no longer know how to make a game at all. I'm not exaggerating this, that's just the truth. And so while there's nothing wrong with making games in engines, because that may be the most efficient way for you to make the thing that you want to make, I don't think you can have a complete game development education as a programmer without learning how everything works right down to the core principles that have been true for the past several decades. That's how a CPU runs a game. And so I think those are essential to learn, and I wanted to show them. So if people want to use engines, that's totally fine. But that is the opposite of what I'm trying to show here. I want to show how all that stuff works, and I want to give people the ability to make their own engine stuff as necessary as well. Because even if you go use an engine like Unreal or something to make a game, knowing how all of it works underneath makes you so much more powerful even in that engine. Because now it means you don't just have to look at the docs and guess how the thing kind of is doing it. You know how the thing really works. And so you can go, oh, I know there must be a way for Unreal to do X, Y, Z, because I know that's how the CPU works and I know it can do it. So let me go find how to do that or write my own plugin that can do that for me. And now you're so much more powerful. You don't have to be like hamstrung by the things that they allowed you to do in that sort of layer, right? So it's empowering, it's educational, that's all good. But the second thing I wanted to point out is saying reinvent the wheel is a very misleading statement. And it always bothers me a little bit when people say things like, why reinvent the wheel? And the reason is because the wheel is an amazing invention. It is almost perfect, or even possibly perfect for what it does. When you look at a wheel, it is the thing that perfectly turns dynamic friction into static friction for moving objects, right? It's something that is so elegant and beautiful that if you asked me why you would want to reinvent it, I would say, of course you don't want to reinvent the wheel. The wheel is amazing. It has worked for thousands of years. It has been unchanged for thousands of years. The concept is the same today as it was when they first made a wheel, probably, right? It does exactly the same stuff physically. Nothing we have developed in the past 30 years of game development is a wheel. We do not have a single wheel. If you think Unity is a wheel or you think Unreal is a wheel, that is just, it's just plain short-sighted. Like, I'm sorry, but that's the truth. In the future, we will have so much more powerful tools for game development that they will make the engines we use today look like a joke. People will laugh at the things that we did to make games today. And the reason that I point that out is not to diss on those things, because they are the best engines we have today. So yes, if you need to use an engine, you want to use some of these things, right? But I want to point out the fact that if we want to get to a real wheel, that when you really do say to me, why would you reinvent the wheel? I would say, you shouldn't. Use the wheel. If we want to get to that wheel, we need people making new things that attempt to be a wheel. And you can't do that if all you know how to do is program stuff in Unreal or Unity, because that's all you get. That's the square wheel, right? That's kind of clunking around. And if all you're ever going to do is build cars on top of that, they're going to be lousy, right? Unless you're driving on a road that looks like this. So basically what I want to inspire to as part of this series, if I can, is I want people to look at this and go, hey, wait a minute. Low-level game programming is not that hard. I saw him do it. I saw how he did it. And I'm starting to understand this. I could go do this. And if they get into it and get excited about it, then they may be the people who make those next engines that allow a whole new wave of game development to happen. Just like Unity allowed so many more people to make games who didn't have that knowledge, who's going to be making those things of the future, right? And so that's why I think low-level programming is so important, is because we need lots of people with those talents and those skills to get us to the point where it really is silly to be working on it anymore. But we are so far from there, trust me.